I just saw this. They're going to play 3 games in London next year. I guess this came out earlier today. I must have missed it. 3 games in London next year. They're all on successive weekends. They're not going to play 4, which they did this year. They only play 3. I think less is, they shouldn't play any, but I think it's a complete waste of time. I know they're trying to build up the NFL in the UK, and this year they're going to do it in successive weeks. So from that standpoint, maybe that makes them think that we'll see if they can put a team over there for good long term. This year there'll be a Seahawk-Raider game there, which is not a bad game. That will be in week 6. And then the following 2 weeks, in 7 and 8, the Eagles will take on Jacksonville, and the Chargers will play Tennessee. So no Rams. They don't have to give up a home game this year. The Chargers this time go. Home game for them. Jacksonville always gives up a game. And the Jacksonville crowd last week was pretty good, to be fair. They took the tarps out of the upper deck. Crowd was into it. Jaguars and Eagles next week and next year. So they give up the home game, and Oakland gives up the home game. They're going to make the Raiders give up home games because they're going to Vegas anyway. They're going to make Jacksonville give up home games because the owner wants to be, Mr. London. And the Chargers don't have a leg to stand on either when they're playing in a 25,000-seat stadium. So that's the story about that. 3 games next year, all in succession, not the 4th, which to me is an advantage. As your scenario is with the phone calls, we start with Eric in Long Island, and he says hello, and he's on Mad Dog Unleashed. Eric, good afternoon. How are you, pal? What's going on today?
Dog, real quick before I get to the Eagles, the play at the Australian Open is Nadal at 3-1. From what you told me just now with that draw, Federer's 3-2 to win that tournament, the favorite heading in. I gotta imagine the odds would definitely change now that draw came out. Because, from what you read to me on the Federer side, as much as I love the guy, I don't think he's going to do as well this year as he did last year. And with the likes of those guys that you named, I cannot see how he navigates.
Listen, he's got a brutal, to have to deal with, though, Pocho, maybe Query, Ranich, Goffin, Zverev, who he just beat in a couple of days ago, but still got to deal with him again. Djokovic, Wawrinka, and Thiem. That is a brutal draw for Fed. He'll have an easy couple of rounds, but then he's going to have to work hard and root for an upset. He could play Gasquet in the 3rd round, and Gasquet is important. Now, remember, too, I was reading a good thing in Tennis Magazine last night. We'll get to the Eagles with you in a sec. And the guy who wrote a very good story. He was talking about rankings. And there are 3 or 4 numbers that you got to know with the rankings. The first number is the 32 seed. Now, you know the difference between the 32 seed and the 33 seed is, Eric?
No, what is it?
Okay. If you're the 32 seed, you get the agate type next to your name, you cannot face a seeded player into the 3rd round. If you're the 33rd ranked player, you could get Nadal in the opening round.
Interesting. Because
the 33rd player is not seeded, he's in the big part of the draw. So in this particular case, the 32 seed is, I'm going to tell you who it is. It's with Nadal, and it's on the bottom half of it's a 32 seed. I got to find out who that is. That's the first thing that is interesting that I found. I'm not even sure who the 32 seed is here in Australia this year. Let's see. 31 seed is Quavos from Uruguay. And the 32 seed, I can't find right now. I don't know who that 32 seed is, but the 32 seed, 33 seed, there's a huge difference. 32 seed is Zverev's brother, who's got a lot of ability. The other thing that's interesting, if you're over 31 and you have been on a tour for 12 years and you've won multiple majors, do you know that you don't have to play in all the tournaments? While if you're under 30 who does not have 12 years under your belt, you have to play the 9 1,000-point Masters no matter what. That means Madrid, Cincinnati, Montreal, those kind of places. So if you're Federer or Nadal, because you've won multiple majors and you're over 31, you are not required to play all the events because you get exemptions because of your age. Not the case if you're under. I did not know that rule. So there you go. A lot of little things I picked up on. Now, more importantly,
all right, Dog.
Eagles, what's your take? Let me hear.
Listen, I'll be headed down there Saturday morning. I'll probably get down there around 10 or so, 11 o'clock. Get myself settled in down there. Listen, I like the fact that they're 3-point underdogs. I think in this particular game, if you like the Eagles, you take them on the money line. They're not going to lose this game by 3. If they're going to lose, I see them losing the game 10 points or more, just because of the fact that nobody's got any trust in the quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. If the Eagle play, if you make it, is on the money line. You're right about that. Go ahead.
I will say this though, Dog. Listen, if you're Doug Peterson, you gotta run the ball with Ajayi. I'd say that to be successful in this game and limit Foles, they're gonna have to run the ball at least 40 times in this game. And I'd feature Ajayi a lot more than LeGarrette Blount in this game. To me, what Doug Peterson needs to do on 1st and 10s, he's got to stop with the pass. I cannot stand the incompletion on 1st and 10. He's going to put Foles in situations that he's not going to be able to.
Now, did you hear Sal Palantonio this morning with Steve?
I did not. I did not.
Palantonio said.
I'm going to listen to that at some point.
Palantonio said that they might go hurry up and give some responsibility to Foles and not necessarily rely solely on a running game.
Well, if they do that, then it's gonna have to be like I said, a quick 2-step drop, get the ball out into the flat to Ertz, one of those wide receivers on a slant, and hope that they can break some runs. But listen, I mean, the magic to me, the magic number in this game is 20 points. The Falcons are 11-0 this year when they score 20 or more, 0-6 when they're under 20. If the Eagles are going to win this game, it's going to have to be more in the 20-17 range. And, Dog, I'll say this. I'm more concerned this week with the Eagles than I will be next week if they host the Vikings. Because I look at it this way. Between the Saints and the Falcons, those are the two high-powered offenses. They're going to be able to score points against my defense. What Foles is going to have to be able to do is outscore the likes of Matt Ryan and potentially Drew Brees. If the Eagles, if they can get by this game and Minnesota's sitting there next week, to me, that's a 17-14 game either way. It's going to be a toss-up, and you know the Eagles will be in that game in the fourth quarter next week against Minnesota. So, to me, the bigger concern I have right now
is the offense. Right.
Is the offense coming off the bye week, not really playing a meaningful game in a couple of weeks. But if they can figure out a way to win this game, and they got Minnesota sitting there next week, and I know Minnesota's got a better defense than the Saints, I like my chances a lot better against Minnesota than I would the Saints.
All right, fair enough. And you saw the NFL statistic. Not since 1970 has a 1 seed beat an underdog in a divisional round. And that might be history. There were no divisional playoffs before that. So not since 1970. There have been some 2 seeds who have been underdogs, but not the 1. So consider that here as you get ready. Tony in Dallas, and he says hello. Tone, welcome. How are you today, pal? What do you have for me?
Hey, Christopher, one point on the tennis, and then I want to talk about the Rooney Rule, is I really hope that Jack Saw can have a good Australian Open because, again, we talked about it last year. American tennis needs to take another step. I think Sam Curry had a good Wimbledon. I wanted him to do a little bit better. I just think that it'd be American tennis just needs to make that turn. We're hanging on too hard to Venus Williams on the women's side. The men's side, we need to take another step.
Well, you know, number one, he shouldn't be. I know point-wise he is, but he's not the 8th best player in the world.
No, he's not.
And Sock is seeded 8th in this tournament. Isner, the big American, is seeded 16. And then you got those other Americans who have some ability, but I think they may be the only 2 Americans who are seeded. Boy, that is a sad state of affairs.
That is a sad state of affairs. That's right. And ever since Andy Roddick retired, literally we have seen a decline in men.
Boy, that is hard to believe. There are I believe that I got Sam Querrey is the 13th seed. So there are only 3 men who are seeded. That is awful in men's tennis.
That's
awful.
Pretty bad.
Yeah,
that's pretty bad. Okay, so your point on the Rooney Rule. Theoretically, I understand what you're saying, but that was not the intention of when this rule passed. Look, it just seemed like obviously that there was no regard, that we're trying to get more African Americans in the front office and into coaching. And if you have a large disparity of what you have in college to what you had in the NFL, that was the whole goal. I understand that. Now, to your point, if you want a certain coach, You have every right to go after.
Well, he
him
owns the team. You can't. You can't tell.
That's right.
You can't tell Mark Davis who to hire. That's ridiculous. Go ahead.
Absolutely. But here's the thing. So then get rid of the Rooney Rule, because what Mark Davis did was completely insult the Rooney Rule. Do you know that the guy that he interviewed was T. Martin?
Yeah, but remember, it's hard to knock the Raiders. They hired Upshaw on a couple of occasions.
I understand.
No, it was Art Shell. It was Art Shell. They hired Art Shell. I think twice.
That's true.
And Hugh Jackson. So I mean, it's
true.
And they have an African American GM
and general manager. I understand that, but that's not the rule. The rule was for head coaching. So you can't. A police officer pulls you aside for speeding. You can't say, well, I got some on the stove, or this is why I'm speeding. No, the rule is, for head coaching job, you must, or for a GM job, you must interview an African-American. The Giants brought out the defensive coordinator for Carolina, even though they seemed to want Matt Patricia or Josh McDaniels. They did their due diligence. Mark Davis, in my opinion, insulted the Rooney Rule by bringing in T. Martin across a bridge, who did not even get a call from Tennessee, and sat around, had lunch with him, had a chicken salad, like you guys calling a shrimp cocktail, for an hour, and then sent him home, and then he covered his bases. That, to me, is an insult to the Rooney Rule.
I understand your point. It does make it look shaky, but you can't tell, especially the Raiders, who were, very good GMs and coaches and everything else. It's hard to bury them when it comes to this. PJ in Atlanta, and he's with us here on Mad Dog Unleashed. PJ, good afternoon. How are you today? What do you have for me?
I'm doing well, Chris. I want to apologize for getting Bobby Knight's records askew yesterday.
Yeah, you screwed me up there. I had to get it right.
I'm sorry.
Screwed me
I
up.
apologize.
Yep.
But you're the one person I could talk to about tennis, excluding 1969 Rod Laver's Grand Slam. Would you consider McEnroe's 84 year, where he went 82-3 and was simultaneously number one in number one doubles and singles, probably one of the greatest years? I mean, he played 85 matches. These guys are playing 60 matches a year. I just don't see it. I mean, that's the golden.
Well, he won three. I think Mac may have won 3 majors. No, he won 2 majors. He won 2,
and then he lost. He got tired in the French Open. Was up 2 sets on Lendl, and Lendl came back and beat him. But
terrible loss. He had a terrible loss. I think it was 2-1. He had a terrible loss to Lendl. I think that was his best chance to win a French Open.
You ever had him on?
Oh, God, yeah. Johnny Mac a million times.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I just started listening to you. So
many a time. And I'll tell you right now, I've always said this story about Lendl, and you're right, Mac had a great year that year. Good job, PJ. And I always said this story about Lendl. Back in '84, Lendl always got knocked around. Everybody knocked him and everything else. Back in, I think it was '84. It may have been '85. It was right in that period. I believe it was in that spot. I worked for a station in Orlando, Florida, and we promoted an exhibition and in Orange County, Florida, not too far away, for Adam Walsh. You remember the Walsh family, the missing kid with the milk cartons and everything else? And Jimmy Connors, who I like, who just got rescued from the mudslides, by the way, with a helicopter this week, if you saw that. Connors was playing Lendl, and remember Connors hated Lendl and everything else. And it was Connors was friends with John Walsh, and so he agreed to play in a tennis exhibition in Central Florida, and my radio station at the time covered it. So in the process of that, when I was doing sports talk there, I was 24, 25 years of age. I was doing 6 to 8, Monday through Friday. During that week, it was a Sunday match. It was probably I don't know when it was. I'd have to look, probably in February. And I promoted it, and I had both guys on. Connors was such a pain in the neck, I could barely get him on. What a disaster. Lendl, and he did Connors a favor by playing in it. 15 minutes, didn't know me from Adam, couldn't be a nicer guy. Could not be a nicer guy. And at the event, and I like Connors, I'm just telling you the way it was. At the event, it was at a country club there, again, west of Orlando. At the event, exhibition match between the two of them, Connors got ejected for hitting a ball at a lineswoman. Exhibition. How about that? Early 80s. Bob Gallerstein. Now, this is an update. I'm sure he's going to break down Philly in his nice casual way with the Celtics today. Torrey had Boston -6, and now it's -4 as he bites his fingernails to see if he can get the green home. Here's Bob Sports Bike, Mad Dog